Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. The Minnesota Twins are looking forward to another great season in 2023, led by the return of All-Stars Carlos Correa and Brian Buxton. With the return of numerous players who were injured in 2022 and some new acquisitions, another division crown and a return to the World Series are in their sights. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller with you, and we have a return guest host, a return favorite, a return everything, I guess. A former Supreme Court Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court, Paul Anderson, who actually needs no introduction. And I'm just going to say a couple of words and get him animated, and those words will then carry us throughout this interview. Justice Thomas, Ginny Thomas, Samuel Alito, Justice Gorsuch.
Sir,
it's yours.
I know that you do not like to use any kinds of words that are profane on this show, because I once did an interview where you had to bleep out what someone said. Those words...
It wasn't your word that we bleeped out.
No, I was quoting somebody else.
Yeah.
But those words, those names, are coming very close to being profane, in the sense that they are a disgrace to our country. I cannot believe what the members of the Supreme Court are doing now. And I used to say it appears that they're tone deaf, because they don't seem to understand or appreciate ethical conduct and what they're supposed to do. But more and more, when I say that to friends, he said, Paul, it's more than being tone deaf. And they go to a word that I don't like to use with respect to the court, but it's being used more and more. They're being a bit corrupt in their actions.
Political and corrupt. It's as though several of them have waited all this time to jump on their own political feelings, and the public be damned, the oath be damned, really everything be damned except putting a viewpoint out there that is antagonistic. I mean, look at Dobbs last year, which took away abortion rights. We don't use the Supreme Court, we don't use the Minnesota Supreme Court to take away rights. We evaluate rights, or we add rights, but we don't use the courts to take away rights. And that was one of many disastrous, and we have done this year after year reviewing the session of the court, one of many disastrous decisions.
Now, you used a key phrase earlier. You said that some of the justices were lying in wait to advance their agenda. That applies in particularity to two justices, Thomas and Alito. Thomas is kind of way out there, and we'll get back to him. But Alito is, one of the phrases I use with Alito is that he does not suffer from an overabundance of humility. He's quite arrogant. He really is kind of hung up on himself. He is and for a long time has been a Chief Justice wannabe. He realizes that is beyond his grasp, but he now sees that with this new majority on the court, he can flex his muscle. He can be if not an actual Chief Justice wannabe, he can be a surrogate Chief Justice in many ways. He does disagree with Roberts, not on a lot of cases, but they do disagree on some fundamental issues on Alito's main agenda.
Well, fortunately, Roberts, as we were talking before we went on the air, has probably realized some of the mistakes that he made in earlier decisions, and in at least several cases during this last term, he has been on the right side, and when I say the right side, the one that talks about justice and people and benefits, so that I think his important, really most important thing is he thinks about his legacy, and maybe he's trying to renovate.
I will loop back and talk with you about some of his certain cases. Justice Roberts is a decent person. I know people who know him. A fellow church member was his roommate at prep school, and how kind Roberts was when that roommate lost his mother. He was a law school roommate of my law associate, George Sowell. Jim Blanchard, former governor of Michigan and congressman, and knows him. But I'm going to be very frank. My opinion of Roberts is continuing to be on a rather steep downward slide.
As is the opinion of the court, unfortunately.
But many will say that he will be remembered. When you talk about legacy, he will be remembered as one of our weaker Chief Justices. Now, some people come back and said, but Paul, understand, Chief Justice doesn't have that much power, and what he's doing now is basically herding cats. No. There have been many opportunities when Roberts could step forward. When Mitch McConnell, about a half dozen years ago, was on his pedestal and spouting and talking about, and Roberts had the chance to say, no, Mr. McConnell, don't do that, because you're damaging the court. He didn't do that. On the ethics issue, he has shown no leadership.
As a matter of fact, Congress asked him to come in and at least sit with them and testify, and he said no.
Separation of powers, he said.
As though he is above that. Well, the fact of the matter is Congress does have the power to impose ethics on the Supreme Court, which has no ethical code, whatever.
But, that's true. But it should come from the court itself. And here's where Roberts has really failed. Designing a code is going to be easy because there is a code of conduct that already exists with respect to all other federal judges. With a few tweaks, that could be made to easily fit the conduct of the Supreme Court. All Roberts has to do is put that together, bring it to the court and said, this is an ethics code. Our reputation is in a garbage can. We're going to adopt this. I want all of you to do it. He would get a majority of the court to go with it.
He definitely would, because he would get the 3 Democratic women, or the 3 progressive women, or liberal women, whatever you want to call them. He would get Kavanaugh, and he would have himself. That's 5 votes right there.
Yeah, and
no matter what.
And Gorsuch would likely go along with him. He would meet resistance from Thomas and Alito. And this is what he could do with Thomas and Alito. He said,
Amy Coney Barrett might
she would
even
come
go
along too.
with
She
him
would,
also.
when she sees the other 6, she would come. But he could say to Alito and Thomas, he said, okay, there are 6 or 7 of us that believe we should have this code. I'm going to go public with it, and I'm going to say it's going to apply to the court. with 2 dissents, do you want to be listed as a dissent? And my guess is that they would cave and join in on it. But he's not showing that kind of leadership, which is very, very sad and disappointing.
It is. It is. Now, he did come through, and the court did come through, for instance, Moore against Harper, which was that state legislatures don't have the power to override what the courts do. That the courts still have the right to,
and most of the court went with him on that.
Right, 6-3.
That was such a radical legal theory. I mean, that really, really comes outside of. I'm tempted to say from right field, but it's even out. It's in the stands. It's in the bleachers. You know, that's how far out of the mainstream of the law it is. And so, thank God. Well, I shouldn't use those terms, but I mean, thank heavens that the court did not go there on that case.
We have a separation of church and state, so we don't say thank God.
I know. I can say thank heavens. So. Anyway, so that's one of the reasons when somebody talks about this current term.
But
say it's not as bad as it could have been.
That's true, and Ketanji Brown Jackson being added to the court jumped right in as though she's been there for years. She is a woman of great caliber and backbone and intelligence, and she showed it immediately in her writings, much more than you would expect from a junior justice.
Yeah, generally it takes a couple of years for a justice to get the field get there. But here's another thing, though. She has done that, and you and I are proud to see that she does that. But she has been viciously attacked by some of the other.
Well, certainly by Alito.
Yeah, because, I mean, okay, when somebody points out how out of the mainstream you are and how you are not really doing your job well, and you can't respond to that on a legal, ethical issue, what do? You do personal attacks. And that's why they went after Justice Brown. And I expect more of it, because she will call out their hypocrisy. And they will have a hard time dealing with it. So expect more of the same from the court in the future.
Now, they also, 5-4, said that race does affect voting maps, and that was a surprise to me.
A big surprise, but is that
Roberts and Kavanaugh, I think, were the two.
Kavanaugh is the least bad of the 3 Trump appointees.
I think Kavanaugh is Roberts light.
Yeah. How I describe him, he's persuadable but not persuasive. But here I'm going to address that case and why it's so surprising. Roberts has long time deferred to the states on redistricting, and has not said the court should not get involved. It belongs to the state. There's history on that. It goes back to actually Minnesota in the early 90s. Scalia was one of the first members of the court to say, no, the states do it, legislature or the state courts, not us. And Shelby, no, it's not Shelby, it's another case where Roberts basically said, we wash our hands of this because it's a state issue. But I think in this recent case, he has realized that no, that's not the way it can be.
The courts certainly have to have a voice over legislatures.
And redistricting affects the national government. Redistricting affects who is elected to Congress. And there might be a scintilla of hope. And I hope it may be even more than a scintilla that Roberts is coming to recognize that.
Now, there are other cases. One that really shocked me was 303 Creative versus Elenis. And that was the case where they held that a business person has the right to turn away clients in a case, number one, where false information was given to the court, which they have done nothing about. Number two, where this woman presented a hypothetical situation. What if in the future I get somebody that I don't want to serve? Well, this court has never dealt with hypotheticals before.
Well, they ask hypothetical questions.
They ask hypothetical questions, but they don't take hypothetical cases. What if in the future this is to happen?
Now, that case is one of the most dangerous cases that the court has come out with, because the way courts have to work is they deal with a case and a controversy. Courts do not reach out and take cases. That is too close to legislating, okay? No, you have a real case and controversy that comes before the court and you resolve it. That is not what happened in this case.
That's it.
It's a hypothetical, and is it the danger? It's a blatant legislating by the court where it reaches out and grabs a case that has no controversy pending in it to come to the court and makes a decision. It is a very dangerous opinion from the procedural point of view.
And it's also a very dangerous opinion because it's once again eroding the separation of church and state, which they did in several cases. And, you know, if the majority, or certainly the Alito-Thomas majority, had their way, they would do away with that separation. One of the things that our founders really were very, very strict about is that there must be a separation of church and state. Didn't happen here.
Okay. We're going to loop back here to your earlier statement about some of the justices lying in wait in order to advance their agenda. Alito in particular, excuse me, I got a little tickle in my throat. Thomas, now Comey Barrett could be dangerous on this, and Gorsuch. They are advancing their religious views on a country where the founders said, see, our founders understood the danger of church and state mixing. I mean, the wars and the death and mayhem that was a result of the insurrection and other things, they did not want that here. They wanted people in this new country to be able to freely exercise their religion. So many of the people who came, who were immigrants, came here because they wanted to express their faith. Now, what we have is a supermajority on the court. Amy Comey Bryant has actually, her group, you know, the People of Praise or whatever, had said this is the goal. We want to reshape America in our own religious image. And that is a very conservative, evangelical, fundamental image.
Dangerous position.
Very dangerous, very dangerous.
Absolutely.
I mean, I belong to a mainstream church, okay? Presbyterian. I mean, according to some of these evangelicals, it's not a religion at all, but I think it is, Presbyterian. But the thing is that maybe, you know, look at it and said, well, do I have as much to be concerned about as a Muslim or a Jew or someone who, you know, does not adhere to the Christian religion? I would think that there are certain aspects, parts of our society have to be very, very concerned about what they see.
And they are. And that's why you hear people saying, well, we should expand the court. How do you feel about that?
Sir, choose your words carefully. as a Supreme Court justice, former justice, I don't feel about issues. I think about them, or I believe. And so you say, what is my belief on that, or what? I think probably, given that I have no power, what do I think about it? I'm ambivalent. I mean, I have in the past been rather strongly opposed to it, but if the court continues on its track, we may have to do it. And here's why I think it is. Are you familiar with the word scofflaw?
Scofflaw?
Scofflaw. It's an invented word.
Yeah.
It's coming up on its 100th anniversary. The Boston Globe ran a contest in 1924 to come up with a name to describe people who could not abide by a prohibition, okay? And it said, there's more alcohol consumed after Prohibition in the United States than before, because people just couldn't comply with it. And what they said is that these people do not follow the law because it does not make common sense. It is, and because it does not make common sense, it's very hard to comply with. So now, let's move forward. The Dobbs case, the abortion case. The United States Supreme Court is making us a nation of scofflaws. I mean, you follow what's happening. You see people trying to figure out how they can avoid this draconian legislation coming out of some states. I mean, now they just said you can get an abortion pill over the counter. People are traveling from one state to another. Minnesota is viewed as a kind of a beacon on this issue. But people are really struggling to see if they can comply with the law that 2/3, almost 3/4 of the American people do not agree with. The court is making us a nation of scofflaws. Donald Trump, because his failure to abide with the rule of law and act with impunity, he is sending a message to our fellow citizens: you don't have to follow law. I mean, how often? I mean, you see these people out on the highway. They think they can drive any way they want, okay? They don't have to follow the law because it shouldn't apply to them. Well, that is a very dangerous precipice that we are on. If, in fact, we see more and more of our citizens say, I don't have to follow the law. Well, the Supreme Court doesn't. Look how they act. And their decisions. You have many members of Congress in doing that. If they don't have to, I don't have to. And so watch out for your freedom, sir. You got a lot of scofflaws who are emerging out there, and we have to pull back and tell them that's not right. Anyway, that's
another big mistake they made was in the Clean Water Act case, where they said that the EPA doesn't have the power. Congress didn't specifically give it the power in certain areas. Well, Congress establishes the EPA and gives it authority to take care of the environment and protection. If, in fact, they don't have the authority to do what Congress tells them they have the authority to do, where do you make that decision?
Now, here's another thing that anybody who's a court watcher needs to be aware of, is in a case like this, the court can find a scintilla, which is a very, very small amount, or a thin thread of legal theory and rationale to base their opinion on. And then they take that very thin thread of that scintilla and expand it into something that is completely different and out of bounds of what where their starting point is. And one of the things about that is that it caused me, we have separation of powers. The president...
We used to, anyway.
Yeah, the president approves or disapproves legislation. The Congress passes legislation. There's a real... Article 1 is the first article in the Constitution that deals with the powers of the legislature, Congress. Article 3, the last of the three, is the Supreme Court. But what we see the Supreme Court now doing is expanding its powers broadly.
Legislating.
Yes, absolutely. You have the right word there. The Supreme Court is encroaching upon Article 1 by legislating, and that's scary.
And you know what's even worse is that time is encroaching upon this interview, and we're limited in what we can say. There are so many cases from just this term that I wanted to discuss.
Maybe you can have me back.
We might just do that,
but I mean,
as we do frequently.
It's amazing, Alan. I cannot believe how quickly this half hour went. Oh, actually, the 26 and a half minutes. It went by in a flash.
And we have a half a minute for you to give your thoughts about this term of the court that just concluded.
It's not as bad as it could have been, but it's very bad. And we as citizens have to push back against it. One of the ways I'll push back, I hope to have an op-ed published shortly about how the court is making us into a scuffle. Good citizens have to push back. They have to act.
Thank you, former Justice Paul Anderson, as always, an education.
Thank you, sir. You ask good questions, you know.